Hello and welcome to episode 84 of the Page One podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
Tarek, nice to have you back.
I know, it's been a while since I've been here.
Yeah, what have you been up to? Nothing major, I don't think.
Nothing major. Had a baby, moved house, and put a book out. It's quite hectic.
Like I said, nothing major.
Yeah, so it's great to be back. It's been, obviously, I'm sure I've not even bothered listening to the last few episodes because I'm sure they'll be absolute crap. So I apologise to the listeners, but don't worry, normal service.
You were in the main part of those episodes, Tarek.
Oh, that part was awesome. I just meant the intro.
Okay. If this is your first episode of the Page One podcast, thanks for joining us at the Page One podcast. We always like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips as possible. And there's a lot of great authors, screenwriters, comic writers, journalists, video game writers, all kinds of writers. So have a look at the back catalogue, and I'm sure there'll be some you want to listen to. But as Tarek has alluded to there, he has just released his very first novel. It's currently sitting at number 1 in the Amazon private what's the category? In
the private investigator mysteries category. Yes. Number 1. It's currently number 27 in the Kindle store, which is quite
there you go.
Exciting. So
that's what you want. So what is it called, Tarek?
Welcome to Cooper, and it's a super amazing crime drama set in a small town in Cooper. So if you're a fan of Mayor of Easttown or True Detective, that sort of thing, that's the kind of jam that you'll get. And it's out right now in Kindle First Reads or Amazon Prime First Reads. But on the 1st of October, if you're not a Prime subscriber, it's open to everybody. So you either jump in now as a Prime reader and get there before anyone else, get bragging rights, or you can wait a month. But
it's on Audible as well.
So an Audible paperback and Kindle version. So very excited about that. I'm thinking we'll spend the next 3 weeks just refreshing the sales feed to see
yeah,
how badly or well it's
I have had the opportunity to read it, and I'm sad to say that it is actually very, very good. I can't really say anything bad about it. So no,
I'll pay that.
Yeah, I'll get that after. No, it's genuinely great. So if you are into sort of Mayor of Easttown, True Detective, dark, gritty detective stories, check that out. Highly recommend it. But enough about you, Tarek.
Enough about me. Let's talk about today's guest.
Yes.
Who is Cate Quinn, who is a best-selling fiction author. She's also a travel writer, and she's quite a number of books. She's written erotica, she's written historical thrillers, and now she's jumped into kind of contemporary thrillers. As you might know her as CS Quinn for her historical stuff, and Cate Quinn's her writing name for her modern stuff. And it's a really fun chat, and she's done a hell of a lot of stuff, including a scary food blog.
Yeah, we chat about that, about the horrible food. In fact, yeah, if you're vegetarian, you may not want to listen to that bit of the podcast towards the end of it.
Or a dog lover.
Yeah, I know. That's not something that got worse with each passing word, the description of that.
Yeah.
But no, it's a really fun chat and really interesting, because obviously she really started out in journalism and then has written all these different kinds, done a bit of self-publishing, got into publishing, written historical fiction, and then now contemporary fiction with her latest book, Black Widows, which is just out in paperback. So we will get straight into that after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea.
let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer? Because I know you have a background in journalism.
I did always want to be a writer since I can remember, since the very first what do you want to do with your life type question at school. I remember age 6 or something, drawing a picture of myself at a desk saying writer. And I've since discovered my mother had some slightly strange plan. She'd read that thing about that you can make any child into anything, the chess playing. I don't know if you've come across that. There was a man who decided he could make his daughters anything, and they all became chess masters. And she had this bizarre plan to make, I don't know if she wanted to make us writers, but she read us like a ton of books. That was her thing.
All right, okay.
So turns out, she told me this when my kids are way over the hill for this kind of intervention.
Too late for chess masters now. They're past the point, are they?
I don't. Well, yeah. I think you've got to start them. You know, they've got to be handling chess pieces in the you're in there. You've got a small baby. You could.
I might just. I'm going to say. Tell me more with this technique. I need to give this a chance. I could live through my child to this. Fantastic.
Start now. So, in answer to your question, yes, I did always want to be a writer, but maybe with some help, parental help.
And so, as I said, you have a background in journalism. How did you get into that?
Sure. Okay. So, like probably many writers, I was very underconfident in my ability to get published, and saw the whole getting published industry as very intimidating. And also, I come from a sort of lower middle working class sort of family, and I either intuitively knew or had a chip on my shoulder about the fact that the publishing industry was run by a class that was that I didn't really speak the language of. So I always had that kind of going on, that if and not necessarily completely incorrectly, actually, that I just didn't speak that there was a certain grammar and etiquette that was a bit alien to me. So I went into journalism in order to write, which I love doing more than anything, to be able to write every day. And that was kind of good enough, just to be able to do that. And being a journalist is a fun job. But I did was always kind of scribbling away in the background, trying to write things, but never quite had the confidence to sort of finish a book or send one off. And maybe quite rightly, because I think some of my earlier books were not particularly good. Some might say some of my later books not particularly good, but certainly certainly my earlier books were, it was very much a learning process.
Did you try and do anything with those earlier books, though, or did you just sort of use them as an exercise and say, right, I'm not going to send this in, I'll move on to the next one?
Yeah, kind of that. I thought, I'm not going to send them in. I think I sent one to one agent. And I think as a journalist, it's only looking back I understand this, but as a journalist, actually, I think you are more of a potential commodity to agents. So they will preferentially look at your work. That didn't occur to me at the time, but it seems quite obvious now that someone who's in the industry who's writing and potentially has contacts, to sort of advertise. But so someone did look at it. I had an idea. It was about a party where no one could remember what happened at the party, but it wasn't a good book. And one agent looked at it and very kindly tactfully didn't reply. And I did chase it, and he kind of tactfully, because he got back quite quickly, said, "Oh, send it in," and then immediately was like, "Oh," radio silence. So yeah, that was a learning experience.
And what was it about the book that you then did get some traction with? What was it about that book that was different than your previous efforts?
Well, that's a funny story, really, because I wrote a book called The Thief Taker, which was a murder mystery set in London, 16th century London during plague time. I had an absolute ball writing that book. I just could not stop writing it. It was such an amazing, fun thing to write, and very quickly got quite a big agent, like the MD of Curtis Brown took it on. It was very exciting. But I hadn't really finished the book. Only really written the beginning, because I was a journalist, and as a journalist you pitch an idea, and if someone's interested in the idea you then go and do the legwork and submit, so this was kind of my style. So I finished the rest of the book, but I'm sure in my youthful arrogance didn't really do it justice, and he sent it out to a lot of people, and they all said no. I think a few said there are some good bits, but no. There was a lot of no's. And then he kind of quite lost interest in me, really. Like very quickly, I was kind of talking to him via his secretary. I was kind of like, I would email him and his secretary would kind of email me back. So whilst that was happening, 50 Shades of Grey came out, right? Big book. Mm-hmm. And my sister, who was doing some self-publishing at the time, I don't know why she did it. I think I did it as a money-making exercise. Wrote a kind of 50 Shades of Grey sort of knockoff, because it was like kind of the writer's equivalent of the stock market in the 80s. It was like there was just so much like traction out there. Mm-hmm. So she wrote this book and got horrible reviews for it, and was so embarrassed that she nearly just took it down. But my sister, being my sister, amazing writer by the way, she very bravely kept on with it, and I think did pull some strings to get some reviews for that book, not necessarily legitimately, but we'll gloss over that. And the book, after those bad reviews, she got a handful of terrible reviews, and then after that actually went on to do really well. Mm-hmm. Sold really, really well. And she said to me, look, you should just write one of these books, these kind of erotica type books. They're very quick to write. And people just buy them, like in there. So I wrote a book. So I read 50 Shades of Grey, and I kind of absorbed the plot and the mainstay of the book, which seemed to me to be mostly dating, actually, like 90% dating. And I wrote a book about an actress and a director, which followed broadly the same
structure. Yeah,
the same structure, and published it. And it did like insanely well. There was like this really, and so I wrote another one. So I wrote 4 in like a month. It took me a month each.
Wow.
And it was like, money fights in the office. It was like such a fun, like weird, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm making all this money from these books. It was brilliant. And you'll never hear me say a bad word about 50 Shades of Grey. And then after that, perversely, publishers were interested in my historical novel, completely different type of novel, not related in any way. But so then that was offered on by 2 publishers. I had a different agent at this point as well. I moved agents.
So did you have an agent while you were doing this self-publishing stuff as well? Did you have an agent at that point?
I don't think I did. And I think I was sort of, I kind of, the agent, so the Curtis Brown agent, who'd obviously kind of lost interest, I sort of wasn't really very happy with sort of just kicking around being treated badly. So I kind of thought I'll move on. I'm not quite sure what the time frame of that was, but I got an amazing agent who's a very dear friend of mine, has been with me for 10 years, Piers Blofeld, who I adore, and has always been a really wonderful champion of my books through, some hard times as well as good times. And I can't quite remember how that timeline stacked up, but certainly he went to publishers with that kind of, oh, look, she's published this erotica romance book, and here is her historical fiction.
So did you put the erotica novel out under a pseudonym, or did you use your actual name?
Yeah, I put it under J.S. Taylor. I thought that was kind of
An E.L. James,
glamorous name.
And was that because you wanted to try and create like a test like environment to see how you could do, or was it because you just were a bit embarrassed with people reading it, and then that kind of, not prudishness, but that I would be embarrassed.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit of cover, isn't it?
If I'd read
for sure, there was a bit of embarrassment about. It's good to have a name to hide behind, isn't it? And I think with the pseudonym thing, like no one actually, and if you're self-publishing under a pseudonym, no one need ever know. You know, it's not like you have to ever have another human being know your identity, actually. So that's quite comforting in many ways. Subsequently, obviously, people in the publishing industry did read those books, which is kind of embarrassing.
I suppose you're there, but then when it's successful, it's like, it becomes a different thing, isn't it? It's like, it's one thing writing
take the mask
a erotic novel where it's like, no one reads it.
All along.
Yeah, totally.
No, it was still a bit embarrassing because, you're writing to a formula, and that formula is not necessarily, well, you guys write novels, you guys write characters. Your characters that you write is not you.
No, exactly.
Or your life, or your wants, needs, whatever. But when you write books that include sex scenes, people almost always assume that that's the kind of sex that you're
totally.
having. And also my sister, I think around about the same time she was doing these novels. So some people, and I have never read my sister's erotica novels, nor would I ever want to, and vice versa. But there were some people in the publishing industry who read both of them, which is kind of mortifying because I have a horrible feeling there would be some similarities. Let's just not even go there. But so and Piers, my agent, I think has read both. So. But yeah, he's a friend of mine. It was a long time ago.
Did you have to do any marketing or anything for the self-published novels yourself, or did you, is it the sort of thing that once you get onto the list, then it can sort of creep up itself based just on the reviews that people are giving it?
So a bit of both, but I did do some marketing, and I think the more it's like when you're self-publishing, the more it sells, the more you're motivated to do, because it's like that dopamine hit of like seeing it go up the charts. You're kind of like, oh my God, it's there. And then now it's here, and it could be, and my partner was super supportive as well. And he was kind of like, would kind of log on and see where it is in the charts, and we'd all get terribly excited. So I did do marketing, but one of the marketing things that I did that I would recommend to any writer, because I think it's the most effective, is at the end of each book, I did like a data capture type. Hey guys, if you like the book, get in touch. I'll send you, like, for my romance, I did like a secret scene, like an extra scene, because they have a soap opera type quality. For my historical books, I do like guess which fact is real. Guess what I made up, and guess what's real history. Because real history is unbelievable. And so whatever means you do it. Then writers would give you their email. It's very easy to do using a MailChimp system or some sort of data capture. You build an email list, and then the next book you email all those people and say, my next book's out. In the case of the romance, what I did was I said, my next book's out, and because I love you guys and you're my special readers, you can have it for 99p, but you have to buy it in the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then they all bought, but they were extremely price motivated readers. So you would get this massive surge. I think, I know that Amazon have stopped that kind of behavior. Not behavior, you can still do it, but they've stopped that unnatural surge in the charts, because you can, if you get, let's say, 200 readers to buy at the time, you could get it almost to number one, really. Maybe definitely to number 10, I think. It didn't take that many, and then that position in the charts is like your massive billboard, you know, like how much would you pay to be number 10 on Amazon? It's like all those views. So I just did that. And then because with the romance, I had a series of books, the effect built and built. So when you had 2 books out, you had the bigger list, and then more people were invested. They wanted the 3rd book, and it went on like that, really. So by the time you got the 4th book out, then it went huge in the charts. Then it would backsell all your other books. Then they would be in the charts, and then you'd have like 4 books, and then that's massive because people think, oh, this book must be really good then, because there's, I assume that's what you do. I would think that there's 4 of them. So that was the most effective marketing I did. I did do other stuff. I put it on through promo. I did all those. That was effective too, I think. But that was
funny. The interaction between author and reader is totally changed in the recent years. You know, there's a lot more interaction. There's a lot more, you know, here, go to Ko-Fi or Patreon or whatever. You know, there's that kind of real interaction that you never used to have when I was younger. And it seems to be really important now to be able to connect with your readers in a way that wasn't, or at least I didn't realize was important perhaps when I was younger. And I wonder if that's something that's just a consequence of so many more authors coming into the scene, so many more ways of publishing books and putting your books in people's hands, that you need to stand out from the crowd a little bit more.
Do you think so? I don't know. I think I can only speak for me personally, because I just, if I like an author's book, I read the author's book, and I don't really seek to engage with them. I mean, maybe if there was some sort of event or something, I'd go and hear.
I'm the same. I've never engaged with an author, but it's something I see quite a lot, and I don't know if it's something that people feel they have to do, or if it's something which is maybe not as important as people think.
Well, maybe I think it's like one model that can be really effective.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah,
and there's people who do it really, really well. Mark Edwards, who's a lovely guy, does it amazingly well, and he's just such a nice bloke, and he will be on Twitter, like he's very genuine. I'm really rubbish on Twitter. I just can't get my head around Twitter. I do Facebook. I don't know if it's my age or what, but I just can't. I'll go on and have little flurries, and I sort of get the idea of it, but I feel it's a bit of a distance to me. I like to be more kind of able to interact with people, and just sort of things like I can't seem to work out the actual basic thing of how to send messages and so forth. But some people are really, really good at Twitter, and I think if you build that following, it works amazingly, doesn't it? And there's obviously readers who do want that.
Yeah.
And so you, after those first novels, you went back to The Thief Taker and the historical fiction. I mean, what was historical fiction something you always enjoyed reading? What was the reason behind going down that path?
Yeah, I did always enjoy history. When I did an English degree and in English MA actually, and I always gravitated towards history, and I am fascinated, in awe of. I love the human endeavour through time. It makes my soul kind of sing. When I go to, like, you get to go to the British Library and pick up old documents, and it's like, someone held this, someone wrote this 200 years ago. It still blows my mind. I still go to cities with old buildings and just think, someone built that 300 years ago. So there is that interest. But then on a cynical level, I also thought I want to write thrillers, but I'm probably not good enough. There's probably too much competition. And I'm pretty sure, I think I either heard or found out that historical fiction was sort of in demand and undersupplied. So there was a definite sort of more cynical element that I thought, well, if I do have this area of kind of expertise, like if I deploy this, I'll be more likely to get published. But then when I started writing it was also so much fun, just to kind of say, like, come with me, it's so cool back here, like, come and have a look at all this stuff. So yeah, there was a definite sort of drive to sort of get through the publishing thing.
You're writing thrillers, as you say, historical thrillers, and one thing we've spoken to other people about when they write historical fiction is, you know, there's this sort of push and pull between authenticity and accuracy, and, you know, you can choose to hew very close to the actual events and the real people, and you know, be almost a slave to that in terms of your story, or you can just there are great historical novels that put you in the setting, you feel the setting, you get a complete sense of the setting, but the actual accuracy of it is maybe not entirely accurate, but it still works as a story. What's your approach?
Well, I would try and be very accurate, but do you know what I think is interesting is people think they know what it would have been like 300 years ago. So people, so for example, C.J. Sanderson would be the king of crime writing, and his novels are incredible and really, really well researched, but they're also quite realistic in a good way, and that's what his readers love. That it's a man with a hunchback, and it's those sort of things. So it's like a real life, and it's not a hero on a horse, doing sort of daring do. And I think the people who read historical fiction tend to be an older audience, and they relate to that feeling that it's real. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So I think there's a perception that doesn't necessarily tally with what it was really like. I mean, none of us really know. Yeah. I'm amazed by how many reviews I get from people who genuinely know what it was like in 16th century London, and they're pretty sure I got it wrong. But so I got one review, for example, for a book called The Scarlet Code, which I wrote, where the heroine is bisexual, and one of the comments in the reviews was like, "Oh, it's a very modern heroine," because people just don't really imagine that you have bisexual, lesbian, different sexualities. But actually, when you skip before Victorian, people were way less staid about this sort of stuff. And if you read the original documents, that perception of sexuality was far broader, and there wasn't that Victorian thing of this is the devil and whatever. It was some people, it was some people had that perception, but some people, aristocrats, were like, it's my body and I'll do what I want with it, thank you very much. Yeah. That's a very meandering way of saying that I try to be accurate, but my books are often not perceived as accurate because I think they don't necessarily tick the boxes of what people expect to get in a historical novel, which tends to be a cozier kind of mystery, and mine are more thrillers, which sometimes surprise and upset people who are expecting the particularly canonical, representation of historical life.
And do you think your experience of being a travel writer, did that really help you find your voice in describing these places? Was that something, is it all kind of connected to your interest in history? Was there a well to draw from that?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I still travel places for that feeling, because some countries, I mean, when you go to India, there are elements of far out in the countryside, you'll see someone using a horse and cart. But there are elements that you're, or markets in developing countries, that sort of thing. So that kind of hustle and bustle and the feeling and the sights of the smells of places that don't necessarily have infrastructure, or that's all. I find that like a really useful resource to kind of try and imagine how that might have relayed to a different country at the time.
But more recently, you've moved into contemporary thrillers and Black Widows. Was it released in paperback yesterday at the time of recording, I think? Is that right? Or today?
So, or is it today? 1st of September. Yeah.
So what made you jump forward in time, as it were?
Yeah. I think I did always want to write contemporary thrillers. So the historical thrillers, whilst I enjoyed them, were a bit of a conduit. And I had this idea for this book. I saw this documentary. There were a lot of documentaries a while back on polygamy, and everyone's very interested in polygamy, aren't they? And I saw this documentary and was really interested by the kind of the buttoned down emotions of the wives of these polygamist, I should say religious polygamist marriages, rather than just sort of polyamorous type setups that are more contemporary. And it just seemed like that all that emotion boiling below the surface. And there was a wife, she had this kind of micro expression when she was talking about one of her sister wives, one of her fellow wives, and it was like, oh my God, like she could kill someone. Like I really believe that woman could kill somebody in that second, and then it was kind of gone, and she looked sort of quite sedate. And I thought that's a really good idea for a story. And then I thought, I don't think I'm really talented enough to do that justice. So I think I never really did think I was talented enough to do it justice. And you know, I think there were some things happening with there was some restructuring with my historical publishers at the time, so I wasn't so happy there, which sort of pushed me to do it. And then when I started writing it, I did think, oh no, I am really enjoying this, and like maybe it's okay. But there was a lot of self-doubt in terms of I loved the idea so much. I was almost like I couldn't bear to see what I might do to it. I was kind of.
What was it like starting? Did it feel like starting again in a way, because you're moving into a completely, although they're both thrillers, I suppose it's a new genre. You might, were you worried, or was your agent worried that your audience might not follow you across that threshold?
Yeah, it's funny because publishers and agents never seem that worried that people that your writers, readers are not going to follow you. But I'm, as a writer, I'm always worried, because as a reader too, I wouldn't necessarily. Yeah. And those audiences are quite distinct. You know, historical readers, as I said, tend to be older, have certain things that they would like. But the experience of writing the book, honestly, was like running downhill. It was like a really, really nice experience that you just couldn't stop. It was like, because I'd not written before from 3 different perspectives, and the perspectives of those 3 wives just sort of bumped off each other. So I would write one and it would kind of charge the next, and I'd be like thinking, oh wow, you know, how would that person deal with this? And if that person thought that about them. And I really, really enjoyed writing like the same thing happened, but 3 people saw it differently. I just loved that experience of doing it, and it did seem to write itself, which is a bit of a cliche, but that's how it felt. It was just so much fun, and in a way that almost the ending wasn't what I expected. When I started writing it, I had an idea of who the killer would be, and it wasn't that same person at the end. It just did seem to have a life of its own, that book.
Did it? Because obviously your new book, Black Widows, is released under Cate Quinn. The previous stuff, CS Quinn, and you've obviously had your erotica stuff as well under third name. And did it feel like you were kind of starting again, almost like a soft launch? I wonder what the reason was for the change of name, and was it just because it was a change of genre, or timeline?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? I think as writers, in terms of having a successful career, it's good to pick one genre and stick with it, isn't it? And just keep going. So the thinking broadly was, I wouldn't have wanted to disappoint anybody who was expecting a CS Quinn book, because they might well be disappointed. But I certainly didn't want to lose everybody, because I think what often happens with publishing is people completely rename themselves, which I personally think seems a bit of a mistake, because it seems like you don't want to lose everybody. There are going to be some people who like whatever you write. Yeah,
obviously like your writing style and your
and
etc.
Give you a go and might be pleasantly surprised. So that was broadly the thinking. And then the other thing was my name wouldn't fit on the cover, so we shortened it, because it's Catherine Quinn, and that the short name and the long name is like annoying for a designer. And they said, oh, do you want Kath? And I think I said, yeah, that's fine. And then apparently in America, Kath isn't really a name, like it's not a recognised name.
All right, okay.
Then they went with Kate, but then there is actually another Cate Quinn, I think. I know there is another Cate Quinn who's amazing. But we sort of just overlooked. It's one of those things where the book came out and it's yeah, I forgot about that. She doesn't think that I'm trying to steal her.
Ride the coattails.
Yeah, because she's amazing. So that was broadly the thinking.
It is funny though, isn't it? That kind of, you're a writer, you have all these ideas in your head, and yet there's a real scariness about moving outside the genre that you've done 3 or 4 books in, and that fear that people would follow you, or the people from the publisher world to put you off it and trying to keep you in your lane. And it's tricky because you don't, as you say, you don't want to necessarily write the same thing for the next 20, 30 years. You want to, have you got these ideas, you want to write them all. But it's, so I think the way you've navigated it is quite interesting. I quite like that.
Thanks. Well, you guys know it too. I think it's the thing is when, as you say, when you do have lots of ideas, you want to do lots of ideas, but the sensible thing is to knuckle down and do broadly the same thing. And how do you marry those two things?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always scary, isn't it? Writing a book is always scary. And
there's a comfort zone, isn't there, to writing what you know people like to read, and branching away from that's a little bit scary. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. And also I think it's, it's quite a hard, I don't want to say it's a hard job because I love it. And I'm guessing you guys love it too, because I think we all do, writers all do. So you can't complain. But at the same time, it's very hard because you're feeling people's feelings all day. Yeah. And that's, that is quite a hard and exhausting and upsetting business, like kind of being that sort of in that emotional place all the time.
Yeah. And was your approach to writing the historical fiction and the contemporary thriller different in any way? Was there more planning required or research required for the historical fiction as opposed to the contemporary one?
I think at that point I'd kind of perfected is perhaps the wrong word, but I'd learned a few things along the way about the writing process. So I deployed those as I learned them. So it was different, but I think it would have been different for my historical too. So broadly speaking, when I started writing my bigger novels, I'll say, because the romance ones were just kind of fun magazine reads that I wrote in a linear fashion. The novels that required plotting and moving parts, I would start off trying to write them in a linear way, and then by the end tie myself into incredible knots and have to go back. And so I by the time I'd written my fourth historical novel, I would try and be a bit more kind of limber with it and sort of write the beginning but in a sort of sketchier kind of way, and then go to the end and then try and write the end. And then often in the writing of the end realise I try to leave myself room in the beginning, basically, so I could go back, because I'd end up with these very kind of like tight, compacted beginnings with like loads of information stuffed in. So I tried to address that. So that was point one that I changed, and I still do that, try and sketch it roughly, but through writing, because I used to try and plot on a page, and now I find that you can write something down as a scene, and then when you write the scene, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but you write it and then you realise in the act of writing it and being in the room that this can't possibly happen for very obvious reasons, but until you're actually kind of in that zone, it seems quite plausible. So that's what I do. And then also I read a book called Save the Cat, which is quite a very well-known writing book, and I tried to deploy that structural. It helped me a lot. I think people have different strengths, and my weakness was I didn't have a tight enough ending, so my endings were a bit flabby. I thought I was like better at beginnings, but the endings needed more work, and it really helped me at least feel like I was polishing up the end and addressing the pressure towards the end. And then I started using Scrivener.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
And then I put the Save the Cat template into Scrivener, and then I used it like that. So yes, when I wrote Back Widows, I was doing all those things, and I think it was the first time I had done all those things like from the start of the book. And I did find it. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, no,
does all that stuff help with revising and numbers of drafts and stuff? Because I mean, is that something which you've kind of gotten better at, like less drafts till you're happy with it, or is it still a process of just?
If anything, we're doing more drafts actually, and I'm really looking forward to getting your notebook. In all seriousness, because things like that I find really helpful. But yeah, if anything, I'm doing more drafts now. But I think that's good. I think in the beginning or in the middle, I'm a very impatient person, and I just wanted it done and in. And now I think I have learned, like, I would never say I'm patient, but I'm more able to kind of accept that it's going to take time.
And is revising something that you quite enjoy? Because for me, that's a part of writing I enjoy. I much prefer the redrafting than the initial draft. I hate that, and that's what I struggle with the most, is that first draft on paper. But the revising, I quite enjoy that because you kind of see it coming closer together.
Yeah, same. I'm the same. Well, I love the very first bit at the beginning, the initial rush where you're like, this is going to be the greatest book in the whole world. And I don't like the bit afterwards where you're like, this is never going to amount to anything, which seems to last a very long time. So I guess that's the kind of, my sister calls it the murky middle. So I'll wake her up and say I'm having a dreadful time, I'm not getting any writing done, and she's like, you're in the middle, go and do some more research, which is probably which is always good advice. And then I love redrafting, because you can just work, can't you? And I really enjoy, I mean, if I didn't have small kids, which I do, I just do it sort of morning, noon, night, and then a bit more besides. And the redrafting, you can do that, can't you? You can just
you can slot it in. It's easier to exactly.
And what about editors' notes and agents' notes and things like that? How receptive are you to those?
Oh, super receptive. I mean, like, I'm so grateful to have them. And I, having sort of floundered around without a publishing deal, I'm pathetically grateful for any feedback of any kind. And also being self-published, my feedback was the readers' reviews. And I'm so grateful to have any feedback that spares me an awful, painful, embarrassing 1-star review on Amazon. And B, those readers' reviews I also learn from, or try to learn from, and really, really receptive. I basically take the view that the reader is always right, and I think even if, like, in some of my historical novels, I've had a few reader comments which haven't been accurate, as in they have been mistaken in. There was one that said that I got the wrong route through London or something, through Watford. It wouldn't have taken that long. And for various reasons, I had described that in the book. But I took the view I hadn't described it well enough. So they weren't wrong. Right. I was wrong for not making it clearer, basically, that they had taken that perception. That was kind of on me. That's more or less the way I view it. Yeah. And I think with the... like, super receptive. But I think you get some that just... I mean, very rarely. I find, like, I get some that don't, it's not that they don't feel right, it's just they feel quite a bit minor and pedantic, but then at the same time I'm like, well, I might as well. Yeah. Normally they're the ones that aren't any effort to add, they're just a bit like, really? Does anyone care? Okay. I figure someone must, so I'll put that in. But the reviews I also use a lot. And I've kind of got, and being self-published, I think, is enormously helpful in realising that the reader is always right, because they're the ones who buy the book. Yeah. And I figure I basically have a policy that 1-star reviews essentially are people who are in the wrong place. They've been very surprised by what they've got and disappointed and angry. So that's, your cover is wrong, your description is wrong. And then 1 and 2 stars probably in that category. So then I would start looking at the cover and the description, saying, well, how is that so different to what they hoped to get? Because they're furious. And then the 3, because it's almost like, you've tricked me with this book, isn't it? But then the 3-star review I listen to very carefully, because they're normally upsetting but valid. So I think in the case of Black Widows, I was very fortunate with reviews, but obviously there are still reviews coming out because it's paperback. But it tended to be that they thought it was a touch overlong. Was a touch too wordy. So for my next book after that, I've kind of really addressed. I've gone through really with a fine-tooth comb and, like, stripped out anything that I thought. But readers were very kind, actually. So far, fingers crossed, with Black Widows.
I mean, that's a very healthy approach to reviews, because, past guests sometimes, avoid looking at them, or, I can imagine, like, if you get a bad review, it can hit you quite hard, even if it's one review in a sea of decent reviews. Sometimes so using it as a way to improve the next thing you're working on, I think is a very good piece of advice.
Thanks. Well, and also I don't know if you guys feel the same, but like with I think it's just a writerly thing, but with the 5 stars and the 4 stars, I sort of don't believe them. I'm like, oh, that's made up. That's, like someone's,
Is that
like, yeah, that. Oh, it's very nice, but they don't really mean it. I mean, it's lovely to hear, but it's funny how that doesn't seem to really go in. You're like, no.
The 1 or 2 stars, you're like,
they're the ones that you're like, they're
And obviously, you're someone who's done your whole career's been writing, whether it's novels or travel writing, etc. So, is writer's block something that you've had to deal with across your writing career? And if so, how have you smashed through it?
Oh, so like not until like this week, I think. Like normally I've been.
Sorry to hear that.
Like, yeah, thanks. I normally I'm very much of the Stephen King model of writing. Not to compare myself to Stephen King, because he's a genius, but the model of turn up at 9, work till 5, get a certain amount of words on the page, and I've always found that easy. Perhaps easy is the wrong word, but possible.
Yeah.
And then I find it, but then I think with every book that goes by, your standards go up, don't they, for the next book? So at the moment I have struggled. I think I am again in the murky middle just currently. So I'm hoping the clouds will break and enlightenment will dawn. I'm just stuck on an ending, and I kind of feel like I don't want to start the beginning until I know the ending.
So is this the planning stage that you're in currently?
Well, I've written quite a lot. I've done quite a lot of I'm doing a sort of sketchy kind of draft. So I've got 20,000 words or so down. And normally at this point, I would go back and start writing. But this time I'm like, no, because I always get to the end and realise I should have put this at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to do that this time. This time I'm going to get the end really sorted so I can just whiz through. But yeah, the end's always, I find the endings are hard.
Yeah. It's the one area you really want to land nicely, because it's the bit, I kind of feel you could have a book that's like 90% amazing and the last 10% is crap. That's the bit that you remember. It's like watching a film, you remember that bit walking out the cinema and you think that film was dreadful. And it wasn't. It was just the ending was poor, but it's such a big impact, isn't it?
Well, it's like,
so true.
Even
how many books have we all read which we were like loving it, and then you get to like the last little bit and it's like, oh, yeah, it's true, and it's last effects.
Well, even someone like Stephen King, who you mentioned, he's, as you say, he's a genius, but some of his books you get to the end of, and sometimes that's a task to get there, and you feel it could have been wrapped up in a tighter way. But so I suppose it happens to everyone, even people like Stephen King. Even people like
Stephen King, yeah. Although I guess his gift is kind of being in the moment, isn't it? Yeah, he would put characters in a scene and see where they go. Yeah. So that's always harder, isn't it, to end books well when that's your style. I'm kind of a bit more on the plot side.
I was reading the Billy Summers, his new book recently, and it's good, but I just finished it this morning, and it goes off and it doesn't go anywhere at all where I thought it was going to go. It's halfway through, it kind of becomes a different book, and it's good, but it's like, as you say, it's almost like just drop stuff in and then lets it run, and there's something about that which is quite interesting, because it's not really like a super plotted, it's just like I got the impression even he didn't realise something was going to happen as he was writing.
Turns up at his desk, what's going to happen today?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's find out. Yeah, but then also there must be a thing surely when authors become incredibly successful where the editors get nervous.
Yeah, I wonder that as well. If they're like, he's like, don't tell me what to take up my books. I sell.
Yeah, I tell you
1,000 copies a day. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. So that's a hard one, isn't it? I hope I never get to the point where an editor can't tell me, to do something that needs doing.
No, but then if you're
in that position, exactly.
Yeah,
I'll become so successful that everyone hates me and I hate my editor and I'm just so rich. That'd be great.
Yeah, it wouldn't be so bad. You're right. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
You also, as well as the books and journalism, you write a food blog as well about eating scary food. I think is that what you described it as, the Food Explorer, where you've in your travels you've written stuff. What I was going to just ask, what would you class as the strangest thing that you've eaten? Because I saw some that were pretty odd.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that very easily, and this is so. To sort of summarize, because we haven't read the book, so it's I basically try and eat food that would be seen as unpalatable in culturally diverse locations. So things like I've eaten testicles, which were really nice. And I don't want any analogies to my former writing. That's completely unrelated. But that was in Argentina, delicious. Centipedes, insects, that kind of thing. And duck embryo was a very strange one. So like a half-formed chick and an egg. But, it's really tasty. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad saying that because it was like a little baby chick.
How do they cook it?
They boil it, and it's like chicken. It's sort of like you'd expect. It's like boiled egg mixed with chicken. That's how it tastes.
But does it make you
I was going to say I like a boiled egg and I like chicken. So
if you don't like chicken, it's
my problem with it is it's just why why not just let it grow and you could have lots of chicken from it. Is it worth the effort of having a duck embryo?
Well, see, I've got chickens now because I had a lockdown moment, I'll say, and I bought some chickens, and we did have some chicks this year because a long reason
for dinner.
We did not for dinner, for that we hatched some chicks, and it's bloody hard work. They're getting those chicks to live. Not an easy process, so that would be my answer to that one. I understand more now, having had chickens.
Okay, so it's just easy. Actually, maybe it's easier just.
What? It's halfway there. Let's hash our chick.
Just put it in the boiling water.
Yeah, but the strangest food, without a doubt, was dog. It was indescribably bad. Me and some friends went to a restaurant in Cambodia. It was this kind of shack place on the outside of town, and we had to get there by my friend making the noise of the dog in order to find it, which I love her forever for doing. Like, that's just sort of thing. One of my so we got there. There was a suspicious odor, a sort of doggy, sewagey.
Oh dear!
It was like not a good. I mean, I like dogs, so it's karma for me. But so we got this. We ate this dog. We had we had cold cuts of dog, which was sort of bad, but kind of like we'd eaten them, a bit liverish in flavour. And then there was another form of dog that I can't remember. And then there was like this stew, and I took a spoonful of the stew, and it was like sort of gelatinous, dog tasting fat, and it was so bad. I was trying not to retch, and my friends said, "Oh, how is it? How is the stew?" And I couldn't answer because I had my hand over my mouth and I was trying not to kind of bring the dog back up onto the plate. So they all thought it was good, and they just dug in, like started it, and I was like, "No, don't eat it." And then we packed it all up because we couldn't eat it. I think that was it. We said, "Oh, we paid the bill." And they kind of were, it was one of those awkward moments where they were kind of packing it all up. It's like, of course you'll want to take this dog you've left. You'll need to be taking this dog with you.
In a doggy bag? In a
literally doggy bag, in these sort of takeaway containers. And then we put it in went back in the taxi, and my friend said, "Oh, what we're going to do? Should we just leave it in the taxi? Should we leave the dog?" And then he was like, "This is a conversation I never myself having."
Is it just general dog? Like, it's not by like breed?
I think there's a certain type of dog.
There's a certain type of dog.
And it looks quite fluffy and cute as well. I've seen pictures, to my shame, I've seen pictures since. And it did really make me think, because the next day I actually didn't want to eat meat of any kind. And I did think, are we just hypnotized to think that meat is okay? And is it all, is it...
I mean, I'd like to think I would try stuff like cow stomach or monkey breed. Certain stuff I would maybe try, but I feel dog is maybe
culturally it's a very difficult thing.
Psychologically I would struggle. I really like dog. We got a dog at lockdown, and
before
that maybe I would probably tucked right in, give me 3 courses. But I think now I maybe I suppose it's a psychological thing. There's no there's no physiological reason. It's purely, I just say it's a cultural thing that is.
I think there is maybe because they eat meat, and I think generally you eat herbivores.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's yeah. I've heard a few folks say that argument before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my advice would be don't.
Yeah, no, I think that's enough of the experience.
In that situation, I would politely decline.
And would you ever want to write in another form, so like a script or something like that? Would that interest you at all?
Yeah, I'd love to, and I often wonder if perhaps I would have been better suited to that, because I love TV and film, but I really struggle with scripts because it's not I've never read scripts growing up. In normal life, you don't, right? I mean, I don't know if there's sort of places you go to where you would, as a normal course of schooling, read scripts, but I never did. So I think, having not read a great body of scripts, I'm really confused by how much you would direct the director. Do you know what I mean? Like how much you take, because as a writer you do everything, don't you? You'd say what people wear, what people say, their facial expression, and I'm confused, I guess, by how much of that goes into a script. But a little part of me thinks that maybe when the kids are a bit older, I might do like a screenwriting script something and see if maybe that might be something I could do.
I mean, but the main difference that we've had from people that are both full-time screenwriters and those that have written books and scripts seems to be that, the book is yours. You'll get your editor's notes and, you can listen to them or not, but it's your thing. But a script, it doesn't matter how much you've created it. It'll be handed off and there'll be 20 other people that get a bite at it, especially movie scripts, I think, more than TV, but even TV. And it's, you have to be happy sort of handing it off and letting it change in a way that isn't the same as a book, I think.
And the actors, of course, bring their own.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But that would be very exciting, I think, to see what an actor would make of the character.
And what's next then? I know obviously you're working on your next book, as you've said a few times, but is there anything beyond that, or is that just the next thing that you're working on?
So I've just finished a book to do with, it was initially called The Lock-In, but we changed the title because I think lock-ins are not lock-in, lockdown. It's like they're not a title that which is about a murder in a Australian outback pub with the two beautiful Californian backpackers end up working in this kind of roughneck or Wigger pub. A local is murdered, they're in the frame, and it's kind of a little bit Me Too, kind of like, did they crack under the sort of sexual harassment, and how reasonable would that be, and did they do it anyway? And then this one I'm doing at the moment is murder in rehab. So it's like a drug rehabilitation. Someone dies, and someone's sister dies, and she goes in, the alive, not dead sister. She goes in suspecting foul play, and has to engage in group therapy with a potential killer. So that the idea is there's a sort of frisson of being therapized with a group of people who you may suspect.
That's cool. I like the sound of that. That sounds good. Yeah.
So is the Lock-In book, has that got a date to come out?
Yeah, it's called Blood Sisters now, which my editor's title, Imad, lovely guy, and great title, I think, and that's coming out I think in April next year. There's always a long delay with books, isn't there?
That's
a great title, Blood Sisters. Like
it's
that,
good, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not very good with titles, so I'm always very grateful for anything.
It calls back in a way to Black Widows as well,
Yeah, there are links out there, and two words sort of interplay.
And is that, have you any plan? Are these all Cate Quinn novels, or are you going to switch back to your CS title?
Yeah, they're Cate Quinn novels. I haven't got any plans to do any CS Quinn novels in the immediate future, mainly because I just don't have time. But I do have a really fun series that I do really enjoy. That's like a kind of female Scarlet Pimpernel that's set in the French Revolution. That is enormous fun, and if I have, just because my kids are like 5 and 7, and so I don't have time to be doing two different things. So hopefully at one point I'll come back and pick up that series.
Excellent.
Nice.
what is the last book that you read?
The last book I read, there were two, and I can't remember which one I read in order. So the last book I read actually was Mr. Loverman by Bernadine, and I'm not going to get her surname wrong. She's a prize-winning author.
Evaristo? No.
Thank you. Yeah. And that was a fantastic book. I really enjoyed that book. But I also recently read Shiver, which is the snowboarding.
Ali Reynolds.
And Sanatorium. And they were both very similar, I thought, actually. Both sort of, they weren't similar books, but the concept of this snowy, kind of Agatha Christie type murder. And I loved both those books. So I guess that's a little snapshot of the kind of books that I've been reading.
Nice. And what about the last TV show that you watched or are watching?
Oh, no, this is terrible, these questions that put you on the spot.
It's like your mind goes blank. You watched an episode this morning and your mind goes blank.
I know. I'm so sorry, I can't think of that. And I do watch a lot of TV.
Yeah, that or something so embarrassing.
I do know what I last watched, actually. I watched a program called, but it's not very interesting, sorry. I watched a program called Made in Mexico, because I'm trying to learn Spanish, which is like a Made in Chelsea, but with Mexican.
All right, okay.
And I love it. And I can't understand a word of it. But,
you're not watching it with subtitles on?
I do. Because I thought, I'm getting better at Spanish. And then realised, absolutely not. But it's and it's really fun for the melodrama type plots. I love all those sort of shows.
Nice.
Cool. And what was the last film you saw?
I'm halfway through a film that's title is going to escape me, and I'm kind of looking at Tarek here because you've got a small baby, so you'll understand the mental blackout that children create. There's a really good film about 7 activists who were put on trial.
Trial of Chicago 7.
Chicago 7, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm halfway through that film because I can only watch things in halves now because I'm so incredibly tired.
That's brilliant, though.
I'm absolutely loving it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the second half.
Yeah, no, it's a really good, ending. I remember.
And just an amazing twist on I love how they actually don't go into their backstories at the beginning. They just plunge you straight.
Yeah, it just kind of just goes straight into it, and you just kind of rolls with it the whole way through. Yeah, it's good. It's I think Sorkin's kind of courtroom drama stuff is my favourite. He's really good at that. Just
because Aaron Sorkin, I mean, what a guy!
I know, I love the guy, and there's certain times you kind of think people wouldn't talk like that, But when you get characters who are really smart and are really good, it kind of clicks. It's perfect. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and who cares, right? I mean, who cares if the dialogues? But dialogues
exactly.
like that.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's kind of like Tarantino dialogue. It's like no one talks like that in real life, but it doesn't matter. It's fun to listen to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the very, very last thing we do is a super quick fire, either or. So there's no right answer, I like to say, apart from one. But the first one is C.J. Sansom or Hilary Mantel.
C.J. Sansom.
Okay. TV or cinema?
Cinema.
Fancy restaurant or street food?
Street food.
Night owl or early bird?
Early bird.
And the last one, real book or ebook?
Real book.
Unfortunately, that was the only one that came.
Disappointed, Tarek.
I thought you would have been right on my side with all the porn you were writing. I'm
so sorry.
I was like, this is going to be shooting.
Lends itself to porn. It is true. I just because I've got such a bad memory. Having a real book. If I don't have a real book, I often forget that I've even got it. So I like to have a tangible.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I will read your book on the ebook, and I'm very much looking forward to it. It sounds like a great concept.
You thought you had the ebook vote in the bag there, Tarek?
I thought it was tied up. I thought for sure, as soon as she started talking about writing erotica, I thought, I'm in. And I couldn't have been more. What a letdown! What an absolute. We had an hour to find out it was wrong. So that was a pretty.
If you're not a regular listener, this is a question we ask all our guests, and Tarek is very much the ebook advocate, and has about 5 votes in his favour.
Yeah, one day we're a silent majority, Mark.
Yeah,
it's fine. Coming back,
yeah.
It's fine. But that was a really good chat. A really good chat with Kate or Catherine or CS or whoever you may know her. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Interesting writing style in planning
Yeah.
terms. You know, writing a little bit at the start, jumping to the end, and then letting that influence the start again. Kind of that.
Yeah, but I know what I can totally see how that would be a useful thing, because I am quite bad at writing quite a rigid start. You really want to pack it with detail at the start, and then that can give you problems by the end if your story changes. So doing it in that way gives you a bit more leeway and probably ends up helping with future drafts. But thanks very much to Kath for coming on to the podcast. Really appreciate her taking the time to do that. As we said at the start, Black Widows is out in paperback now, so you can go and pick that up at your bookshop or get the ebook version even.
I would 100% advise everyone to buy the ebook version.
Yeah.
Obviously, ebooks are better.
And obviously you can also buy the ebook of Welcome to Cooper. And actually, next week's episode, which is the last episode in this season, is a special one because we have our worst guest ever.
I was going to say, you were finally getting the big guns into the studio.
Yeah, no, next week, if you can bear it, it will be me interviewing Mr. Ashkenani himself about Welcome to Cooper and his path to getting published, which is an interesting one, I know. And it'll be great fun, probably a bit different from our normal interviews, and I'll have to come up with a different alternative to real book ebook, I think, because I already know the answer to that.
That's one. A slam dunk.
But yeah, so I hope you can join us for next week's episode, which, as I say, will be the last in the season, and then we'll have a short break and come back with more guests after that. But otherwise, if you enjoyed the episode, if you could give us a quick rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you're using, that would be great.
And of course, if anybody wants to get in touch, they can send us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @right_gear, or an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk.
Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you next episode.
See you later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @UKPage1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.